America, this is your heritage.
This is a small house rotunda. It joins the main Capitol rotunda with the old house chambers. In this room are 3 statues, including this one, of the Reverend John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg. In the 1770s, Reverend Muhlenberg pastored 2 churches in the tiny town of Woodstock, Virginia, on the west side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. One of those churches was an English-speaking Episcopal church, and the other was a German-speaking Lutheran church. In addition to pastoring these 2 churches, Reverend Muhlenberg was also a member of the Virginia legislature. In mid-January of 1776, Pastor Muhlenberg returned from the state legislature in Williamsburg to his churches in Woodstock. Even though the Declaration of Independence had not yet been signed, armed conflict was fully underway. In fact, British troops were already at work in Virginia. They marched on Williamsburg, seizing the Patriots' gunpowder and munitions. Patrick Henry quickly rallied 5,000 Virginians to retake those munitions or to demand full repayment by the British for what they had seized. With the state on the brink of war, on January the 21st, 1776, Reverend Muhlenberg stood in his pulpit and delivered what was to become his farewell sermon.
Let me read from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time for war, and a time for peace. In the language of Holy Writ, there is a time for all things, a time to pray, a time to preach, but a new time has come. There is a time to fight, and that time is now. If we fail to stand against the oppressor, if we don't rise up to protect ourselves and our precious liberties, we will lose them to the tyrant. For none else will take up this cause for us. We must make the sacrifice. We must bear up in arms in the fight. So I call you now to stand with me in this cause, most urgent and noble.
Outside the church, Pastor Muhlenberg ordered drummers to beat for recruits, and some 300 men from his congregations joined him that day. They became known as the 8th Virginia Regiment. The Reverend John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg went on to become one of America's highest-ranking military officers. He finished with the rank of Major General, one of only 17 officers in the American Revolution to achieve that rank. And you will find him in the picture in the rotunda of the surrender of the British at Yorktown. This statue, depicting the moment in which Pastor Muhlenberg removed his clerical robes to reveal his military uniform to his congregation, reflects yet another aspect of America's rich spiritual heritage depicted so widely throughout the Capitol building. Interestingly, John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg had a brother, and his brother was also a minister. And he's also featured in a prominent location here in the Capitol. John Peter's brother was the Reverend Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, pastor of a church in New York City. Frederick had at first been critical of his brother becoming involved as a minister in defense of liberty. But when the British arrived in New York City in 1777, they drove Frederick from his own church and then desecrated the building. Frederick thus found himself rethinking his position, and he too made the decision to get involved. You can find his portrait hanging directly behind the current House chambers in what is called the Speaker's Lobby. It is a room filled with portraits of all the previous Speakers of the House. Why is a portrait of the Reverend Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg prominently displayed there? Because he was the original Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. In fact, his signature is one of only 2 on the Bill of Rights. Another remarkable contribution to American liberty by yet another minister of the gospel. You'll find that one of the great military leaders in New Jersey was the Reverend James Caldwell. He was a Presbyterian pastor. And at the early stages of the American Revolution, we had a lot of will, but we didn't have a lot of means. I mean, we did not have much in the way of equipment, ammunition, supplies. We didn't have much in the way of money. You'll find that a lot of the soldiers in the first early years of the American Revolution went for 3 years without being paid anything. We couldn't afford it. So it's really a bunch of farmers and business owners and ship owners taking their own private resources best they can to go fight the world's greatest military power. Well, during one of the battles, as they were fighting the British, it was a battle outside a church, the Americans ran out of wadding for their guns. Now, if you don't have that wadding to hold the powder in there and separate it from the lead, it's not worth having the lead, not worth having the powder. So they ran out of the wadding. he gets this brainy idea. He runs inside the church and grabs the hymn books and brings the hymn books out. And the hymn books were Watts Hymnal. Watts Hymnal done by Isaac Watts, one of the greatest Christian theologians in history. So he brings that out, and he gets this kind of thought, and he says, we can deliver a message to the British twofold here. So he tears out these pages. He said, let's give them Watts, boys. It's like, let's deliver some pure doctrine to the British here. So they used the hymn books for the wadding in there. And that's a very famous painting out of the American Revolution called Give 'em Watts by this preacher. Well, obviously the British want to take him out. And they tried to assassinate him one night, shot through the window on his house, and actually ended up killing his wife. The bullet deflected, shot his wife. And that just dug his heels in even further. So he would fight during the week, and on Sundays would preach at his church on Sunday. And on Sundays, he pulled out a really big Bible, big pulpit Bible, and on Sundays he would lay 2 braces of pistols up on top of that Bible, and he would challenge anybody to take his guns or take his Bible away from him. I mean, he was just not going to be intimidated.
Wow.
And that was the character and the caliber of so many of those leaders. George Washington, in his famous farewell address of 1796, reminded us why our government and its policies were so successful. He declared,
"Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports."
Yet many today, including many Christians, have fallen into believing that Christians should not be involved in civil government, that there should be some sort of a compartmentalization, that our faith should be kept in one arena and real life in another, and that the two should never meet. The Bible does not teach that, and fortunately our founding fathers and early ministers did not believe that. Yet many critics today try to invoke what Jesus said in Matthew 22 as proof that Christians should not be involved. But this is a complete mischaracterization of that passage. Matthew 22:21 says that we are to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. But do you remember why Jesus said this? He was asked whether it was right to pay taxes. Jesus picked up a coin, asked whose inscription was on it, and when they said Caesar's, Jesus replied, "Then render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." That is, render your due to the government and render your due to God. You have responsibilities in both areas. By the way, here in America, who is Caesar? Our Constitution says that Caesar is we the people. So are we saying that God should not be involved with Caesar, with we the people? That makes no sense. Jesus affirmed that we have responsibilities in both arenas because of our dual citizenship. We are citizens of heaven, but we're also citizens of earth, and we have duties in both arenas. But beyond the passage in Matthew 22, there are many other biblical passages where God endorses the involvement of His people in the civil arena, an institution that He Himself created and ordained. For example, notice that in Romans 13, verses 4 through 6, on 3 separate occasions, the Scripture says that those who are in civil government are, quote, ministers of God. Perhaps this is why so many ministers were involved in the civil arena during the founding era. They believed and obeyed the Bible. Consider also Hebrews 11. This is our Faith Hall of Fame. This is where the great heroes of our faith are held up to us as our examples. And we're told in Hebrews 12 that it is these heroes who are cheering us on. Yet notice that every one of the heroes of our faith listed in Hebrews 11, verses 22 through 34, was involved in civil government. Why would God hold them up to us as examples to emulate if He didn't believe it was right for His people to be involved in the civil arena?
During the Revolutionary War of the 1700s, the local church, pastors, and clergymen played a pivotal role in the founding of our nation. But how did the church respond to such lingering issues as slavery and civil rights? Is there still a role for churches and pastors to play in today's political arena? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.